Elektrificatie is de meest efficiënte manier om de industrie te verduurzamen. En de Nederlandse Noordzee biedt meer dan genoeg energie die we met offshore wind kunnen gaan opwekken. Alleen, zolang er geen langdurige vraag is, is er geen business case voor de opwek van elektriciteit. En als er niet genoeg opwek van elektriciteit is, is er geen business case voor elektrificatie. We zitten dus met een kip-ei-probleem. Mijn vraag is, hoe lossen we dit kip-ei-probleem op?
Yeah, good question. We'll come to that in a minute. We're going to talk about renewable energy, and today we concentrate on heat. The use of heat dominates the Dutch industrial energy system. More than 80% of the energy consumption in the industry is used for heat. But at the same time, the industry also discharges large amounts of residual heat into the environment. So in 2050, it all has to be a closed circle. And the question is, how are we going to do that? I'm sure my two guests here and one on the screen will have very solid answers to the problem. The first one is on the screen. She's Program Director Deep Eutectic Solvents, fantastic word, and Heat at ISPT, Annita Westenbroek. Annita, hello. There you are. Yes, your sound is a bit low, so maybe you can speak up a bit more. The second one is here live in the flesh, Head of Unit Climate and Energy at VNCI. That's the branch organization of the Dutch chemical industry, Martijn Broekhof. Welcome, and Tjeerd is back too.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm back here because Kees Biesel should be here, but Kees had got corona. So
he really got it?
He really got it.
Oh.
He's in bed, and it's not. He told a very nasty story half an
hour
ago.
Well, maybe he's watching. Stay sort of healthy and recover fast.
So, but he briefed me completely, so I know what to say.
Good. Martijn, the question in the video, can you remember it?
Yes, which was about renewable power, I think.
Yeah.
But we're also going to talk about renewable heat as well. But,
sure. But first of all, as long as there's no business case, there...
It's difficult, of course, and the chicken-egg problem is very well known. So as long as we don't have a sustainable source of renewable power, it will be very difficult to immediately switch to using renewable power or using more electrification. This is a well-known issue. It's not new. But think about these complex chemical installations. They're huge. They're significant. Mm-hmm. So imagine making that switch. It's $1 million investment, which you make for 20, 30 years.
But the longer we stare at it and say, oh, it's really a huge problem, the sooner we begin.
Exactly.
So
there's no simple solution to that issue. Mm-hmm. I think that's the first thing to notice. We don't know exactly how to solve it. I mean, the first thing is to acknowledge there's a problem, we don't know how to solve it, and let's sit together to start thinking about how to do that. We can solve from our perspective, just from industry. You can't solve it just from the renewable or from the power sector. The government can't just dictate it. So somehow we just have to sit together and start thinking about how to do that and start acting on it.
Yeah. What would be your first step in that? So we've seen the problem now, it's huge. Yeah. And what would be a good thing to do the coming 2 years?
I think the coming 2 years, start being serious about the commitment. So the commitment from industry is, yes, we will make the minus 49 to 50%. That's under the climate agreement. We've committed to that already. We're very serious about it. But there's multiple options to get there. One is through power, but the other one is maybe through applying more CCS, carbon capture and storage. Well, either way, you have to kind of go one way or the other. From a government perspective, you have to make sure that you are going to invest in the infrastructure, for instance. Caroline Geels was here before. She's done a great job with the task force on infrastructure for the industry. That shows there's a lot of urgency. It takes a lot of time to invest in that infrastructure. Let's be very clear, as a government, we're going to commit ourselves as well that we will make sure that for instance, that big cable is going to be available. Yeah,
it's a good line.
If you think
we want the big cable to be available.
Of course, yeah.
It's a good line. Cheers.
And we will supply the technology to make a very effective use of it, because electrification, of course, At this moment, it's more expensive than using gas for heat or whatever. But the nice thing about electrification also is that you can make use of heat pumps. So the efficiency of electricity is about 2 or 3 times higher than normal gas. And when we would have a system where gas would be a little bit more expensive and the electricity would be less expensive, then it already becomes a good business case.
It's a different model then.
Yeah, it's a different model, and that's also a matter of cooperation between the government, who is paying.
But what would it take? Because we're talking about it for 5 minutes now, and you say it's a huge problem, it's complicated, but there's ways to start. Then you say, hey, if you look at it differently, there's a new business model, and we have to use pumps more, and so it's relatively simple not to execute it, but to get the hang of it. It's not that complicated. So
no, this is not from a technical perspective. This is not the most complicated issue. No,
and still we're not speeding up.
Well, we are.
As far as we're talking about low temperature heat.
Exactly. I think that's one of the things. So if you think about this issue, you're working on electric crackers, the cracker of the future. That's something that's not available right now. We don't have that technology. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll start doing that. High temperature.
The same with CCP, CCU, everybody's talking about it, but...
Well, let's first get the first CCS cluster industrial up and running. We're moving ahead on that, and that's a world premiere. Yeah, so that's good.
That's good.
But for electric cracking, we don't have a solution yet at all. Yeah,
which is good. And we have to start.
For residue heat, it's a little bit simpler. Yeah,
right.
But there, the complexity is much more in who do you work with. Yeah, it's up to the fence. I think companies can do quite a bit, but then beyond the fence, you need to have the infrastructure, and you have the cooperation of the built environment. The local governments need to kind of get things started, and then you get into the people's houses.
You see?
Well, then it becomes very complicated.
Yeah.
So,
let's go to Annita. She's been listening from a distance. Annita, what do you think so far?
Can you hear me?
Yes, right now it's much better.
Oh, that's good. Well, thanks to my charming cameraman, I guess. So.
You have a charming cameraman. Can we see him?
Yeah, well, maybe.
The upper half was okay. So go on.
You looked a little familiar to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think in addition to what Martijn was saying, I think it is also looking at the heat pumps. They are maybe there, but there is still quite a big challenge also to get them integrated, because it's not like a fridge that you have a plug and you put it in the socket. It is something that on which you have to adjust your process.
But why is that so difficult? Because I was in the harbor of Rotterdam, I think in 2016, and there were 264 companies responsible for 21% of the carbon dioxide emission in the Netherlands, and they said then and there, we're going to make this harbor circular in 2050. And the first thing that really didn't work out was the heat exchange system. 2 years later they said, oh, it's practically impossible to do. So, Annita, why is it so difficult?
Why is it difficult? Well, I think the difficulty, of such a heat network is that you are also dependent on each other. So it's quite often not the technology, but it's the whole organization. And who owns the energy? Who owns the heat? Who is the one that is responsible for taking care that everyone has sufficient and it is being cascaded? So there are a lot of things that need to be developed at the same time. So not only infrastructure, not only the technology, but also our whole organization and also all the whole legal framework.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Martijn. Who's taking care of the whole legal thing? Who owns the new system? How are you going to divide it?
There's many ways to cut it and to work it out. I mean, there's nobody who is really owning the whole thing.
But are people actually digging into it and coming up with solutions?
Of course. I mean, the heat exchange, the steam project in Rotterdam is a big one. And they've been talking about it for years. The plans are there. We've also tried to kind of calculate it with the national carbon price and how it works out. Well, such a national carbon price and uncertainty in that process doesn't really help you to make that investment or to build a business case.
Right.
So you also need to have some extent of certainty from policymakers, like this is something we want to have, and as such, we're going to make it work.
And we're going to support it for 10 years and...
Exactly. So, and that's not a simple solution. Just a carbon price as such won't drive this thing. You need something else as well. You need to have a mix of policies that are very developed, very refined, which help you in the specific case.
Because the big risks.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the big difference between this transition and the energy transition is that it's mostly brownfield situations. You have existing installations which will need to be replaced with renewable installations. And that's very different from just taking a piece of offshore sea and build some offshore wind project there.
Make something new.
You build something new, it's greenfield. It's relatively easy.
Far more
and if
simple,
you make that step towards what policy you have in place, if you think about the subsidy scheme that's in place for renewable power, wind on land has about 19 different categories of subsidies, because every situation is different.
Is that very Dutch, or do the French do that too?
Well, it works, because we want to have all these things up and running, and it's different if you are behind a dike or on top of a dike.
And it's quite easy to calculate, because you know how much the wind, how strong the winds are, etc., etc.
Yeah,
exactly.
So then it's easy, but in our
But still, 19 different types of subsidies.
But
no, it's
so
same
Dutch.
subsidy, but different categories. And I think we need that kind of differentiation in the industry as well. And this is the first year that it's being opened right now, the subsidy for industrial decarbonization. But there's one category for residual heat.
You really believe in it, don't you?
Of course I do believe it.
I like that, because I see your eyes light up like, yes, we need to get going. Good. So let me put a question to all three of you. How optimistic in the end are you guys?
Well,
Martijn.
I mean, we have to get there, so I'm relatively optimistic.
Relatively?
Yeah, I mean, it's if you compare the conversation we have in the Netherlands right now, to the conversation in Europe, we're way ahead. We're talking about how to facilitate the transition. Well, in Europe, it's much more about the instruments and much more just about how
do we really
work.
want this? And
it's more defensive in a way, more reactive.
We're looking more into the integral system, and I think that's very, very important. And that the dialogue between government and industry is really going on, because we are going to need high temperature processes. Because we need to activate, you need to activate molecules. So there always will be high temperature processes which are impossible to do with normal heat pumps or whatever. So we have a residual high temperature heat. So we will going to generate that high temperature heat with either hydrogen or electricity, and cascade from there on. And that's how it should be done. But then you need a solution where also the urban environment is involved, and also the intermediate users of heat are involved. And that's how we should cascade it.
So again, it's the bigger picture. And
it's the bigger picture. And that's why poldering, as you mentioned earlier, is very, very important to really get everybody at the table, because that's a way to really reduce the overall carbon exhaust.
And would it be possible that the way getting there takes a lot of time and negotiating and developing and innovating, and then all of a sudden you just flip it over and then it will start? Because you have to get things in order before you can really change? Or is that a bit too Jip and Janneke?
Well, I do think that we need to speed up and accelerate in every way possible. In a way we do policy making, in a way we start thinking about our business cases and our investments, but also in the way we do innovation, actually. I mean, the way we do innovation at the moment is very sequential in a way. You try to develop something, it doesn't work, you take something else, try to develop that.
Training on the job.
That doesn't really work if you think about the scale of the challenge. So you need to start thinking much more in parallel innovation. Try everything that's on the table, move it forward. If things doesn't work, pick the other things which are way behind and move them ahead as well.
Good.
And at the same time, develop the market.
Yeah, but it will eventually come after it, I think. As soon as you start changing, the market will follow.
Not necessarily. I mean, at the moment, a lot of the innovations actually get stuck at tier level 5. So where you start kind of running into the valley of death. And that's really what you need to solve as well. And make sure there's a significant market pool.
To push it over. And,
otherwise...
and when that's indeed for our heat platform, what we erected Annita is heading, we try to get more companies with the same problem together to really create that market and make a sizable heat pump, for example, which can be rolled out in different sectors, in the food sector, the paper sector, etc., and thereby reducing the cost price and
share the problems and share the solutions,
share the risk, and drop the investment cost.
Let's go to Annita for a bit. Are you optimistic, Annita?
Yes, I'm very optimistic.
Very.
I'm convinced that we will make it. I'm definitely convinced, but I think it's also because the urgency will grow. So as soon as the urgency is really high, we will just do it. Then at that moment we will have everything in place, and everyone will cooperate to get this integral solution. So as I think also Chair well explained, we need to work together to get all the elements, and we will do it. And I'm convinced that technologically it's possible, but we need to cooperate to get all the elements together.
Good. I think your cameraman will love you even more now. So, let's go to Nathan. Are there any questions?
There are some questions, although first the chat seemed to be slightly distracted with the toy tractor on the table, and they thought this session would be about farmer protests. But
No, the circular agriculture will come on later. So.
Yeah, I said that.
Oh, good.
But the questions for this session would be, first is a statement from Wil Duivenvoorde. Maybe you could react to his statement. He says, heat distribution is about, indeed, infrastructure, but also about redundancy issues of all users and suppliers connected to a grid. So I was wondering what your reaction would be.
Martijn.
Well, yes, if you think about the way the Netherlands are organized, we have like 4 or 5 specific integrated chemical clusters, and they're all using each other's heat and processes and feeding off of that. It's for the process streams, but also for the heat streams. So making an investment into an efficient use of heat somewhere will release some more steam somewhere else. Trying to work that out is extremely complex. Again.
Yeah.
So
But the good thing is, in a small business park like the Netherlands, when we can figure it out, we can spread it all over the world.
of course.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
So you just have to work a little bit harder, Martijn.
I will do my best.
I agree with that phrase of yours, because we should be the guide country for really implementing these things.
I think so too, because we're very well organized, and
We're
if we can
well
fix
organized,
it,
we listen to each other.
yeah, most of the time. Annita, what do you think on the statement?
Well, I think we in the Netherlands, but I think everywhere in the world, we have proven that we can do the same with electricity and water supply, where also the demand and supply may vary. So it's a matter of storage and a good distribution network, but it can be done. And also with the whole digitalization we have, then I think also the smart artificial intelligence kind of systems can help us out.
Good. Nathan, final small question before the break.
A small question, a direct question. From Jordi Koenarts, we received the question, can there be a short explanation about what an electrocracker is and what the benefits are?
Oh, good.
Cheer, you want to do it? Well, chemical cracking is basically the way we make plastics. With a very high heat process, we transfer mostly fossil fuels into plastics. And that requires a very high temperature. We have 5 of these in the Netherlands. They each emit about, 0.8 megatons of carbon emissions a year. And they run 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Well, transferring those into electrocrackers, that's the challenge.
Yeah, it's very interesting to do it, because an electrocracker gives the opportunity to really circumvent the emissions of carbon dioxide, and they're complex carbon dioxide emissions, because you use the 1/3 of the total to heat it up.
Yeah.
And when you can do that with electricity, you in principle make a climate neutral cracker. And this cracker, which we use now for the fossil fuels, we can use it later on also to use waste chemicals of waste plastics or whatever. So with one strike we make the crackers completely sustainable for the coming 30 years.
Yeah, that would be nice.
They will help in the transition, even though these crackers are still running on
fossil fuels.
Of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
They can be rebuilt and that's why this electrochemical cracking is very interesting.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think somebody at home is really glad. Guests, thank you very much for this part.